Hello everybody, it's Whiskey11, and today we're going to talk about air-to-air refueling in the A-18C Hornet in DCS World. This is probably the most stressful thing that you can do in any aircraft in DCS World. And I think the large part of the reason for that is it has to do with the fact that it just requires so much concentration on your part and such a high level of finesse when it comes to formation flying. It's very easy to get frustrated with the whole scenario and then just kind of write it off as, well, screw this task. Hopefully by the end of this video I'm going to give you at least a tip that's going to help you start to get used to air-to-air refueling, and that's going to be the use of the autopilot functions of the F-18 Hornet to dampen the movement of the joystick some. And we're not actually using anything with regards to the autopilot to like altitude holds. We're not using any of that to try and control it. Basically, we'll start off that way, and then we will progress to something else. But before we do that, I want to show this doing that it can be done. Just good old stick flying. And, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause it. We've got a lot of things that are going to happen relatively quick. We're going to get our probe out. Need to check our throttles in here. We also need to radio the tanker and tell him that we are intending to refuel. Now, this tanker, I think, is traveling about 316 knots or so. So we've radioed him. He says, proceed to pre-contact. So there's a couple of things with flying off of a tanker that you need to know. There are 3 areas of a tanker that you need to know about. If there are multiple people tanking off of the same tanker, there is going to be a waiting area, and that area is going to be to the left, off the left wing of the tanker. If you are tanking, obviously you're going to be directly behind the tanker and probably connected to it. If you are done and you're waiting for your wingmen or other members of your flight to get done with theirs, that is going to be off the right side of the tanker. Now in the lower left hand corner of this video, I have added in the control inputs so that you can see what I'm doing. And the big one to pay attention to is the throttle position more than anything. So let's go ahead and let's catch up to the tanker here. You're starting to get a little bit away from us. And really all air-to-air refueling is flying in formation with the tanker. Everything else is just a matter of dampening out, your own, what they call pilot-induced oscillation. And pilot-induced oscillation, let's go ahead and let's deploy our speed brake here so we don't overshoot him. It's going to be very close. Okay, so we're here up close and personal. You can see how we're just moving up. Okay, so we are going to be next in line to refuel, so we're going to move in behind him. And once you move into this position, this is when you can radio him ready pre-contact.
Ready pre-contact.
He should say cleared contact. The drogue will come out. And one of the common mistakes, and certainly one of the mistakes that I made when I was doing this, was I had a tendency to try and follow the basket here, but once you get yourself lined up with the basket from a distance, your approach, you want to predominantly be focusing on the aircraft. So we're going to make contact. Now it's a matter of flying in formation with, whoop, you're going to get too far forward. And then it's just a matter of flying in formation with the aircraft in front of you. Yeah, we got a little too close, and this is what I was talking about. It's a little bit harder to take off the S3B than it is something else. Okay, so just watch all the control inputs. You can see here that we're doing our best to try and keep it. And what I'm focusing on when I do these air-to-air refuelings is I'm focusing primarily on the nacelle where the drogue basket is at. That's the pod that the basket actually comes out of. But you really just need to pick a point on the aircraft and focus on it. Different people have different places where they focus on the aircraft. I'm not worried about trying to keep it in any particular location, more or less just trying to keep it in the same place in the window if I can. And this requires, a lot of input correction. and you want to make small inputs. Now, the other thing that a lot of people struggle with is the pilot-induced oscillations, and a large part of that has to do with control scheme setup and how sensitive their curves are. You really have to add quite a bit of curve to a lot of the joysticks in order to make this work most effectively. This isn't the prettiest formation flying. I'm not very good at formation flying. But again, I'm focusing entirely on the aircraft that I'm flying in formation with. And every now and then we'll show some signs of actual skill at doing this. Inlet ice warning, go away. I am not going to deal with you right now. I don't care if the engine's ice over. I just want to finish this air-to-air refueling. Dear God, please. And I legitimately don't focus on anything until I hear, refueling or transfer complete, which is the sign that we can go ahead and back off. But I'm definitely spending a lot of time focusing on the S3B, trying to fly in formation with it, where the basket stays connected to the probe on our aircraft, and it just requires a lot of little movements, and I hope you can see that in the joystick curves in the bottom left-hand corner, what is going on with regards to the throttle and the joystick inputs. But this is hard mode. This is actually realistic mode, I guess you could call it. We're so close. We're like within 600 pounds. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna call it there. You guys get the point. So from here, we'll go ahead and we back off, right? Assuming we're the only aircraft here, which we probably will be on an S3B. And then we come off to his right wing. And then we enter into the observation area and retract our probe. And this allows us to watch the other aircraft in our flight do their air-to-air refueling. Okay, so that's doing it the hard way. We almost made it. You can see how close we were. So close. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll restart this, and I'll show you the easier way to do this, which is going to involve the use of Autopilot to help dampen out our oscillations. So we'll go ahead and we will pause this real quick, and I'll explain what it is that I'm doing. So you'll see me turn on the Autopilot, and then you'll see me hit the barometric altitude hold. And reality is we're not actually going to use the barometric altitude hold, because as soon as you start moving the stick up and down, the barometric altitude hold is actually going to break off, and it's just going to go into a mode in which the autopilot goes into a attitude hold. I suppose you could also use an attitude hold, but if you get yourself in the wrong attitude to start off with, it can be kind of hard. So we'll go ahead and we'll unpause this. We'll turn on our barometric altitude hold, and we will extend our refueling probe. Make sure we back off our throttles just a little bit here. Okay, so we'll call up the tanker, tell them we are intending to refuel. Bring this back to the autopilot so you can see kind of a little bit what's going on. We've not added anything aside from lateral stick input, so at this point the barometric altitude hold is still technically on, but as soon as we start adding in any form of significant... There you go, you can see it turned off. The two dots are... The colon is no longer next to the barometric altitude hold. This actually goes into a pseudo, like I said, attitude hold. And this actually allows us to fly this approach much easier. Okay, so we are next in line. We'll go ahead and we'll slot in behind the tanker. You can see how much smoother this is. And what this is good for is it really does take out a lot of the pilot input stuff. And I use a lot of trim in this. Okay, so we're in the pre-contact position. Call it out. Should say cleared contact. And at this point, really what I'm doing is I'm focusing primarily on the throttle input, and I'm using trim to get my up-down movements. Now, the only problem with trim is that at these speed ranges, a couple degrees of trim, as you add speed, are going to have different effects. Okay, so once again, still focusing on the aircraft that I'm flying in formation with, just trying to line things up with the basket here. Focusing on the aircraft, a nice slow approach. Ooh, you can see we dropped out in speed just a little bit. Okay, and contact. So now once we're in this position, it's much easier, provided I don't get too close, it's much easier to fly in formation with this aircraft, because now all of my movements are basically going to be doled out by the autopilot, and we can make small corrections using the trim to deal with up-down movement, as well as small corrections with the ailerons, our right-left, to keep us behind it. And the autopilot does a really good job of basically holding that previous attitude. We're going to come off if we don't get a little bit closer. And once again, it's not doing altitude hold, it's not doing auto throttle. You won't find one throttle position that's going to work for air-to-air refueling. It's just like when we were talking about on-speed flying with the carrier. There is no one throttle position, and so your throttle is going to be moving back and forth pretty much constantly during this entire operation. And back off just a little bit. No, I need to come off just a little bit. And you'll see that there's this, like, you overshoot, and then you come back to where you previously were in order to make those changes, and then you kind of hover around that point. And this is due to the fact that the Hornet's engines have a delay in the ramp-up of them. This is a known issue. It's particularly bad in the Hornet compared to other aircraft. And so it seems to be one of those problems that happens more and more frequently, and it's harder to work around, but that's why you see the throttle movements. You make a big throttle movement, and you kind of correct, and you back off, and then you start to oscillate around a certain point in order to kind of stabilize the aircraft at certain speeds without using the auto throttle. Now, the problem with auto throttle is as you get heavier and heavier, the aircraft is going to start to slow down. The auto throttle doesn't keep up nearly as well, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't get the speed exactly right because it's not flying at exactly 315 or 316 or 314 knots. It's somewhere in between almost always. And this is just covering this when it comes to level flight, and I highly recommend you just practice this with level flight. Once you start adding in flying in formation while banking, this gets a lot harder, but you can see how much smoother this is. Okay, so transfer is complete. We can now back off. Again, checking back. There's nobody to our right, so we'll go ahead and we'll go into the observation area off to his right wing. And again, the autopilot here was used for nothing more than to dampen out the oscillations and the control inputs to prevent us from going into pilot-induced oscillation, which is the constant feedback loop of trying to, stay in a specific place. But anyway, that's air-to-air refueling made easy. I hope this video has been a big help to you guys. It was just a little tip and trick that I learned when I first started out, and it made it be very, very easy to do air-to-air refueling. Obviously, it's not the most realistic way to use the autopilot to do that, but it is a way. It does work, it does help, and it takes a little bit of the stress out of the whole operation. Anyway, I hope this video has been helpful. I'm Whiskey11 signing us out of the Gaming Lounge. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for watching.